Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. It's really great to have you here. I am so excited for today. My name is Christine Perfetti. For those of you I haven't had a chance to meet yet, I am the founder of a company called Lift Up Connections. I do a lot of work helping folks in tech grow in their leadership, grow in their careers. And the big thing that's a passion project for me is helping those in tech reinvent their careers and think about what's next. And that's the purpose for today. It's an understatement to say that the tech industry right now, all industries really are a bit of a mess. We have AI coming, there's been a bunch of layoffs, there's a lot of uncertainty. And the goal for this session, my one hope, and it's why I invited these wonderful panelists who I will introduce, is that there's a lot of advice out there. My goal for today is to give you an opportunity to hear real stories, real concrete stories from brilliant leaders from the product, UX, and beyond the product and UX world to hear what their stories are and how they've pivoted. So, with that, I'd like to do a brief introduction of my panelists, Rob, Melissa, Malini, Stephanie. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
I'm very excited to have you all here. I warned you I may embarrass you a little bit, but before we jump in and give you a chance to share your stories, I wanted to share with the attendees on the call why I asked each of you specifically to join. So I'm going to start with you, Rob. Rob and I have known each other for years and years. I'd say it's at least over a decade. We worked at the same company, but not at the same time. We both worked as head of UX at Acquia at different periods. Why I invited Rob, he's an amazing UX leader. He's been a leader in the design and UX space for forever. I hope that's okay to say. But Rob is also seen, he's been this for me and he's been this with other UX practitioners and practitioners. He's a support. Rob, I'd say we weren't closely connected up until the last year or two. And you reached out, and you've been reaching out. I've been hearing from others in the UX community just to connect and hear how they're doing and support them. So thank you for being here today, Rob. I'm so happy you are.
Thank you for inviting me.
Melissa Appel, we've been working a lot together over the last few months. Melissa's a product leader, a product coach. She's been previously at many, many companies, working as a product leader at Wayfair is one of the companies. And Melissa and I actually connected a little over 2 years ago, and it wasn't about product. It was about, as I was going through my career reinvention, I was interviewing moms, and I interviewed you about your experience as a mother and your experience as a product leader. And through that discussion, we've got to know each other quite a bit. I'm a big fan. Can you point to your book, Melissa's co-author of Aligned, which is a wonderful product leadership book. It's a book called Aligned, Stakeholder Management for Product Leaders. And Melissa's going to share a bit of her story. I'm thrilled to have you here. Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you.
Malini, he and I have known each other for more than a decade. We actually did work together at Acquia. He is an amazing friend, an amazing UX leader. She's been working in-house as a UX leader for 2 decades. Right now, you're figuring a little bit what's next. There's going to be a big facet of UX leadership, but you've also been moving into teaching at the university level, which has inspired me quite a bit. One reason I really wanted to have you on, Malini, is I think about the work you're doing and how you've been thinking about how do I take my values and bring it to my work. I'd love to talk with you about that, but your shift has been quite inspiring. All of your shifts have been inspiring to me, but I'm really happy to have you here, Malini.
Thank you, and Christine. I'm happy to be here.
Stephanie, last but not least, I think sometimes when I'm inviting you on, I have you on last to introduce you. And it's always because, how do I describe you? You're a powerhouse in many different spaces. You and I met about 2 years ago. That's a constant theme that I've been having lately. Why I was so excited to have you on, many reasons. You take action all the time. You have your PhD, you've been working in leadership at B Cognition Labs, but you also started, and I saw you start right around the time 2 years ago, your political podcast, Freedom Over Fascism, which is amazing. And why I think of you when we talk about career reinvention and taking action, oh my goodness, you do such an amazing job of that. So, with that, welcome, Stephanie. I shared why I invited you here. I'd love for you each to take a couple of minutes. This is a session about career reinvention and real stories. And I'd love to hear your real story around that. Many of us are product UX tech leaders. So not going into full background, but a story about your pivot. And Malini, I'd really love to start with you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Christine. I've had a few pivots in my career so far, but I'll talk about the most recent one that happened maybe a few months ago. So, like a lot of people, I too was impacted by a layoff. And as a result of that, whenever a disruption like that happens, it's a natural point for you to go back and reflect on what you've done, where you want to go next, all of those things. So again, like you mentioned, I've had a long career in 20 years and it feels like I've been there and done a lot. So I was also looking for things that would keep me enriched, engaged, all of those things. So personal values, personal things that I was looking for, but also to be a little bit pragmatic, to stay open-minded and to be open to the opportunities that might be around me as I was thinking about what next. So, as I was thinking about all of that, teaching came into my mind pretty early on as something that I always had wanted to do, add on to my profile, because you collect so many experiences over time as you're working as a practitioner, as a leader, all of that. I feel like there's a great way for us to synthesize and present it back to the community. It's a give back, but also there's a lot of learning because you get in touch with young people and you learn from them as well. So that seemed to be a natural sort of a thing, especially coming from coaching and mentoring of teams and all of that. So I started with that, but I also said, I'm going to be networking anyways. So I'm going to keep my doors open or try to identify doors that I want to keep open. So I've had conversations with consultants, I've had conversations with franchise owners just to understand what they do. So really thinking out of the box, but some things where it was more intentional, like this teaching thing. So I was networking actually through one of your Lift Up podcasts, right? Where you had me featured and there was a panel and I met one of them, Diana, who I met through that event. And then we were just talking and she said, you want to teach? I have this opportunity. And then this opportunity from Northeastern came up. And it was amazing for me because it was a perfect way to test waters and reconfirm that this is something I really like to do. I don't know if I'm going to be doing that full time right now, but I certainly know I've opened the door for something that I will do more and more of as I continue my career from here on.
Malini, thank you. And as we're going through this, I will chime in and talk a little bit about the lessons you've had. But what I'll have you all doing when you go around, there were some key highlights you shared, Malini, reinventing. We talk a lot about networking, but you told networking just saying, hey, let's have a call and catch up. When you mentioned your networking with the Lift Up group and Diana, it was really authentic, deep networking. You really got to know Diana and build a community there. I'm wondering, this is a hard question, and I'll ask each of you this, but Malini, if you were to pick one lesson learned, and admittedly, you've been saying it's not a huge pivot,
Yeah.
but if there were one lesson learned that you'd like participants to take away today, what would it be?
Yeah, I think it is about reframing the concept of reinvention, right? So sometimes people think we need to reinvent because we need to escape from something that's not working. So for me, it's not that. It's about evolving, right? It's about what else I want to be. What else do I need in order for me to feel authentically myself at this point in time, now that I have extra experiences, strengths, and other values that have solidified. So really just coming to alignment with that is what I think is a reinvention. And so for that, I think you really do need to listen very deeply to your inner voice. Sometimes we go with expectations more than anything else or norms. So I feel like that's my big takeaway is to just stay connected with your inner voice and try to align with who you're becoming, right?
Melanie, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Rob, I'm turning it over to you. I did not give the main teaser of why I invited you here, but I'd love for you to get a chance to tell your story. I mentioned you're a UX leader. You're also a published author. So can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Very quickly, I
Yeah,
graduated,
time.
yes, time boxing. I graduated with a degree in illustration from RISD, which was followed by but what I call my bohemian years. I interned for the Peggy Guggenheim collection in Venice. I worked for a sculptor in
Wow.
Milan. I was a project manager on the Cristo Environmental Art Project down in LA. And then I worked on a 78-foot brigantine doing charters in San Francisco Bay. And then I stumbled into tech at a time when it was like being a railroad engineer in the 1820s, meaning that like, just riding that wave, all of a sudden, like new tracks are getting laid down all across the world. And it was fun. It was definitely a great, great ride. Was a multimedia producer, information architect, UX designer, UX director. Now I'm currently freelancing as a UX strategist, but perhaps the most recent pivot has been the true crime author. Earlier this year, published a book called Murder in Rockport, Massachusetts. Actually, technically, History Press published it. I was a co-author along with Gloucester historian Wayne Sioni, and it is out. It's available where fine books are sold. And I'm actually currently I have a new contract for another true crime book, which is going to be tentatively called Murder in Salem, Massachusetts. And it's about a 1941 crime that has connections to the 1947 Black Dahlia case of Los Angeles.
Nice. So will all of your future books be about murders? Or maybe other true crimes? Can I ask you one question? The same question I asked Malini, and we'll delve in deeper. I wanted you all to have a chance to tell your stories, and then I have more in-depth questions for all of you. But so you've had many pivots in your career, eventually moving into UX. The story around becoming a published author and that shift, is there any recommendation you have for people who may have something outside of their traditional day-to-day UX or product or engineering job to start making the shift? Do you have any main recommendation for folks? Anything you'd like them to take away?
I mean, the process is very similar to like applying to college. I mean, basically, you have to pitch an idea to an acquisitions editor, and you have to kind of button up about like, okay, why is this story interesting? What resources are you going to use to tell the story? Why would people be interested in it? So I think that one kind of takeaway for creative UX people that are perhaps thinking about developing another project into a line of work or something is to start thinking about, how can I structure this? How do I actually kind of take this idea that I've been thinking about for the past 5 years, but actually kind of structure it in a way that I can turn it into reality?
Thank you. Stephanie Gerber Wilson, you were intentionally chosen not only for your expertise in the podcasting world now and your shift there in leadership coaching, you are our only panelist who is not from the product and UX world. So welcome. I did want to ask you about this most recent pivot we were speaking about. Like, you've had many, many pivots. I think you mentioned to me 6. Can you talk a little bit about your shift into podcasting and what lessons learned you've had along the way there?
I would love to.
Cool.
That
Rob,
counts.
Rob, I don't know if you and I were doing the same thing or similar at the same time in San Francisco, but it's entirely possible.
Probably.
So recently, 2.5 years ago, actually, I had been working as a communications director for a state level candidate for State House in Indiana. I live in Massachusetts. And so that's a totally different story. And she lost. And a political strategist recommended that she do a podcast to keep herself relevant. And so she's like, oh, okay. And I was going to be the producer. And I found the guests and I figured out how to do all the editing and I put together all of the questions and didn't say much at the beginning. And then I realized she wasn't so interested and I was loving it. It was kind of unspoken, but she kind of didn't continue and I made it my own. Even within that, so I just started. Okay, so here's the deal. You have an idea, you figure out how to make it possible technologically, because it's not as easy as it looks, and start. You don't have to have 6 months worth of content. You don't have to have a lot lined up. The key is starting and getting out of that paralysis of not knowing what you're doing. Most of us don't know what we're doing when we're starting, especially like something like podcasting. That is actually one of the hardest parts, especially if you're shifting. It's like, or you've just been laid off. I work with a whole bunch of people who've just been laid off, and that paralysis is the thing that gets them stuck. I think A lot of times, just starting will get you on the path, and momentum will carry you, and you'll revise and sharpen. And I'm even in the process of sharpening what I want to talk about now. It has evolved, and just allowing that evolution to happen and opening yourself up to the idea that what was doesn't have to be what is or what will be.
Stephanie, thank you. There's nothing like sharing publicly instead of sharing privately with you, but your advice about taking action and just getting started. There's another component to your podcast. Absolutely. Get started. You've also been incredibly consistent with your podcast. You started 2.5 years ago, and you've been consistently taking action week after week after week. And it inspired a couple of women. You were in one of our Lift Up cohorts. A couple of women in our cohort, including me, have started a podcast because you inspired us to do it. And what you taught me was take action, be consistent, have your own voice. So thank you. And we'll talk more about that.
Well, I'm
Melissa
glad.
Appel, tell us a little bit about yourself. Your book is in the background, but we met, the book had not yet been published. I know you've had several pivots as well. What we've most spoken about is your decision to write the book and your decision to move from in-house leadership to coaching. Can you speak a little bit to your story and your biggest lesson learned?
Yeah, I think for about 20 years, I had zero pivots. I was doing the same thing, working in product. I worked briefly in UX research and then went back to product. But then, as a lot of people in tech, I got laid off at a certain point. And it was January of 2023. And that was when there were news articles about people at Google having to like show up at the office and see if their badge worked in order to figure out whether or not they've been laid off because there were so many layoffs happening. They didn't have the infrastructure to even do it properly. The thought of looking for another full-time job at that moment was just not pleasant. Luckily, the book hadn't come out yet, but my co-author runs his own consultancy. So I was able to get a little bit of work with him. In the past year, the economy has kind of fallen off. So, leads slowed. So I've been working on how to work with Bruce, but also to do my own thing, doing coaching, one-on-one coaching with product management leaders, but also like mostly product process transformation for teams. So how to helping companies modernize their product management practices. So yeah, I mean, that was sort of my pivot. And I guess my biggest lesson learned would be that as an in-house, I was doing coaching. I was helping the people on my team with career progression and advice on day-to-day work and things like that. And I was also helping the company with improving processes and things like that. But as an independent consultant, like a lot of my job is sales and marketing. And that's something that I guess I knew, but I didn't know quite how much of it that would take up. So that's just like I've advised people who are like, yeah, I want to go into management. It's like, do you really want to go into management because you enjoy managing people or because you think that's just the next logical progression? Because it's a different job. And so coaching and consulting, like some of it's the same work, but some of it's just a different job day to day. If you're looking to make a pivot, I think it's useful to talk to people who do that other role and see, hey, where do you actually spend your time? What do you work on to see if that's the right thing for you?
Melissa, thank you. Thank you. Little hidden secret. We're going to delve into all of your stories a little bit more. The hidden secret for attendees. So each of these individuals I've had a chance to talk with about their pivots. It's been part of some of these conversations have been informal, which was with most of you, but also more formal conversations with now it's close to 90 people who have been going through career growth and reinvention. And there's some key patterns that come out. And I'd like to speak to what you all said, my research lens. Thank you for sharing your key lessons learned. My hope is for attendees, you can be scribbling down some of these ideas, but connect it to the person who is sharing it, where you can see how these stories translate into the recommendations really helping. So what I wrote down, Malini, thank you. Following your inner voice and listening to that inner voice as you make a pivot. That comes up time and time again when I'm talking and interviewing with people. Rob, knowing what your value is and the story piece, like as you mentioned, as you were making the pivot into true crime novel books, it wasn't like you said, aha, I'm now a true crime novelist. You were thinking about, I believe part of the story, and we'll delve in, you were writing about these topics, but finding your voice, understanding the value of what you're offering, and know your story so you can be pitching it. Stop with the paralysis. But thank you for that recommendation. Just starting. You don't need to know everything, but that is, Stephanie, you made that key point. I hear this over and over again. Most people thinking about reinvention take months and sometimes years and sometimes never act. So even taking that small incremental step. And Melissa, you were talking about the aspects of sales and business development. I love, and this is an excellent recommendation, your suggestion that people talk with others who are in that type of role to be learning. I also was hearing from your conversation, a theme that comes up in these interviews is the people who are most successfully reinventing really have a growth mindset. And Melissa, you were saying you hadn't done a lot of sales work and biz dev, but you're learning it and you're growing and you're finding out from others what you need to do. So those are just some of the themes that came out from the real stories. So thank you all for that. What I wanted to turn to is delve a little deeper into your stories and specifically ask about some of the other themes that are coming up in the stories I'm hearing from people reinventing. I thought what I'd like to do is start with something that I didn't share as a question with all of you. Your stories sound they don't sound messy. When we come on a panel and we're like, oh, we have our books, or oh, we have our job at Northeastern, or a highly successful podcast. Was there any messiness there, or sadness, or grief? And I'll start with you, Melissa. Like, you have your published book, you started your new coaching business. Any sort of grief? You touched upon moving on from your last job, but like, how do you manage that? And was there messiness?
When I got laid off, there were definitely stages of grief. I had like worked there for 5 years. I had no intention of leaving. I really liked my team. So there was definitely that. But I've always had the mindset of if you look for them, there are opportunities around. That when you feel like there's a lack of opportunities, sometimes it's just that you have to look harder. And so when I was thinking about what I wanted to do next, I approached it from both directions. So it was like, okay, what can I do? And then also like getting a sense for who I know and what's going on and sort of listening for opportunities and evaluating them as opposed to just saying, oh, it's helpless. Like there's nothing I can do. I did go through a little bit of that. But after I got out of that, it's like, okay, well, what are my options? Right? What are some things I can do? What are some things that I like doing? Who are some people that I know? That might be an opportunity. Mm-hmm. So thinking about, it is messy and it might not end up exactly the way you planned, but if you keep an eye out for what opportunities might present themselves, I think you'll have more options.
Thanks, Melissa. And I know you all had different configurations. So some had layoffs and some did not, and some are thriving but finding new pivots on this panel. I'm wondering, did any of you, and it's okay to say no, but one of the themes that comes out of reinvention is when that messiness starts, or the surprises, or that catalyst, did any of you take a pause? Just pause before you were thinking about your next action steps, or did you move right on? Stephanie?
I had to stop my working because of health issues. And so there was an enforced pause, not quite like a layoff, kind of a self layoff in some ways, but it took a lot of work and therapy to learn how to separate my self-worth from my job. And I think that is a key piece, is learning how to separate yourself from a career you've always had and being able to look past, this is what I do, this is who I am. And so I just wanted to put that out there. That is a hard process, and there's a lot of grief involved, but to reach out for new directions, it's pretty important to be able to separate the two.
Well, Stephanie, you're hitting upon something that we didn't touch on yet, which is reinvention. I mentioned I intentionally chose some of you who are taking some smaller pivots and others who might be saying, oh, I'm doing something brand new. And reinvention could be small pivots or larger, but there always is a component of a shift in identity in some piece. And that's tricky. And Stephanie, thank you for highlighting that because you also highlighted that piece about action. And what we've been seeing is a lot of people are struggling to take action because of the identity that they're holding. So I appreciate you sharing that key point. Rob and Malini, this question is for both of you. I haven't decided who I'm going to ask first. One thing that comes up, and I've been highlighting, and it sounds in concept, there's only one you, and people will roll their eyes when I say that, like, okay, there's only one you. But there really is. When you think about your career trajectories, what I see when I'm observing all of you on this panel, only you could be doing this specific pivot based on your genius, based on your expertise, and based on your interests. So I wanted to ask, I'll start with you, Rob, and then I'd like to bring it over to you, Malini. Rob, when you were starting, and we didn't delve into the blog you were starting around true crime and the work, but there is only one you. Like, what led to you writing about true crime, and what zone of genius and superpowers did you bring to this part of your career?
Well, I don't know if I have a zone of genius.
You.
I would say that I've found a intense curiosity has always been sort of part of my character, and also kind of being, scrappy, I've found that definitely either as a full-time employee or even as a contractor, you often are subhuming your recommendations to the needs of the organization or the client. I mean, that's just part of the game. And I found myself very, very hungry for having more control over a project, which is why I started getting into writing, because it was like there was no one telling me how much like research to do, how to organize the chapters, that kind of stuff. It was up to me, and it felt good. It felt right. And there was some sort of inner part of me who was like, yeah, this is the way you do it. It was that sort of feeling of, yeah, wow. I don't know what it's kind of like. A sports metaphor would be all of a sudden you pick up a baseball bat, tap a soccer ball, and all of a sudden you're like, God, this feels right. So there was a feeling to it that I was like, okay, yeah, this is innately part of my skill set. And I didn't, yeah, I'd been using it in UX research and stuff like that, but it wasn't, it just, again, it was this sort of feeling of feeling right. That's the way I would describe it.
I appreciate that. And it also aligns. I'm going to pass it over to you, Malini. But Malini, when you were kicking off talking about understanding and following your inner voice, it could be your inner voice. But Rob, you're talking about as you're doing this work, and I've been seeing this as well, just projecting. You can tell when it's a work that's aligned. You can feel it. It's not even just the voice in your head. We know. And the one thing I'd like to share for those in tech where it's a mess, sometimes it's financial implications. You need to find that next job. You may not be feeling the alignment. Totally get it. If there is an opportunity where you do have space to pause, trying to find those opportunities where you just feel it. That's one thing I think all of us would encourage you, finding something that aligns with your inner voice and what you're feeling. So thank you, Rob. Malini, turning over to you. Again, like there's professors, but you're teaching at Northeastern, you're looking at other opportunities, you're teaching up-and-comer designers. Can you talk about I do believe you all have zones of genius. So I'm just going to say, can you talk about your superpowers and zone of genius?
I think it's more than the genius. It was a lot of preparation. It's a lot of sort of being open to, go in thinking you're going in to teach, but first you need to learn a lot in order to be able to stand in front of a class and to be able to actually get through a lecture even, right? The amount of preparation that I needed within a short amount of time to get ready to teach was something that I had not truly wrapped my head around. So there was moments of deep anxiety and deep nervousness. And I was like, what did I get myself into, right? And now I was set and scheduled to teach, and I had to get ready. So there's also a little bit of that both paralyzes you a little bit, but also gives you that momentum because now you have to do it. You've signed up. And that's, again, I think where I agree with Stephanie, that you just need to get started and then you will figure it out. And that's exactly how it happened with me as well.
And to share, Malini, I had mentioned to everyone here, we know each other quite well. We worked together. I also hear from people, like you mentioned, the amount of preparation you took. You're a strategic leader, but it's also a talent of yours. Not all people are as methodical as you are. Like I've seen this as one of your superpowers as well. So I understand for you, it's just a given. You would put in all of the prep. For everyone, not necessarily to the degree you have. It is one of your strengths. And if there's one thing I'd like attendees to start thinking about is what is your superpower and brilliance? And I do think it's important to share, Melissa and Stephanie, why this is your journey. Like, what about your expertise? Again, can you share with product coaching, like why this is your journey? And then Stephanie, I'd love to talk about the podcast, why you. But Melissa, what zone of genius led you to this path?
I was thinking about this as I was trying to figure out whether or not I wanted to keep coaching or go back for another in-house role. At my last job, as part of a leadership training, I'd done a 360 review. So I went back and looked at that. And I think my superpower is bringing calm and logical decision making and de escalating chaotic situations. That was what helped me when I was a manager to coach people through difficult situations and even to work with teams and get alignment by saying, hey, let's think about this logically. Let's, try to take the emotions out for a minute and kind of approach it in a different way. So that's, I think, what's helped me in coaching and even in-house advising as well, is to just sort of be able to take a situation and be like, all right, we can handle this. But I think where the flip side of that is on the sales and marketing side, because sometimes I'm a little too calm about things. I'm like, it'll work out. And I think with any superpower, it comes with the opposite side of it, which is the situations where it's not particularly helpful.
Absolutely. Melissa, thank you for sharing that. You're absolutely right. Like thinking about that flip side is really important. I'm going to have a little, Stephanie, I want to bring it to you. And then I have a little exercise that I just surprised I have an exercise. But Stephanie, we didn't mention that you were recently, like back to your superpowers in this podcast, you were not part of the political, I don't even know what to call it, like the political major players when you got in here. But recently, I know you were in my neighborhood in DC and you were hosting a panel.
So I had the opportunity, there was a panel with my podcast network, which sounds a lot more glamorous than it actually is. They were hosting Ben Rhodes, who is a co-host of Pod Save the World and was an Obama staffer in foreign relations for all 8 years and since. And so I, along with the head of a politics institute at the University of Southern California, interviewed. It was sort of a reverse panel. Like two of us were interviewing Ben Rhodes. I think what we're trying to get to is this was this great opportunity, but the way that it was important for me to do it is to really listen to what he was saying and formulate questions based on the conversation and not just what I wanted to learn in advance. And I think that is one of those things that is one of the things that's me, is that I like to take the conversation where it goes organically. Yeah, I can move it, but you get a lot deeper if you can follow the thread as far as you can.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stephanie. And I had mentioned to all of you, I'd like to open it up to attendee questions in 1 minute. So if you have questions, I see we have a question that I'll ask. Thanks, Barnaby. I will also be asking some other questions here. I did want to ask you all one question, putting you on the spot, so not all of you have to answer. I put up on my screen, can you see my screen? There's these little puzzle pieces, and some of you may have seen this before. Like, so we talked about knowing your brilliance, knowing your values, knowing, what energizes you versus depletes you. These are some puzzle pieces when I've been interviewing now close to 100 people about the facets of reinventing themselves and what they think about. It's their zone of genius. Career capital. Career capital is, the way I describe it is, I love yoga but I'm not going to go out and become, da-da, I have my new yoga business because I have no career capital there. I do not have connections. I have not been in that world, and it just doesn't make sense right now. Career capital is the network you've built, the reputation you've built, the loyalty you've garnered. And what I wanted to ask you, for those of you who are open to sharing this, the way I describe this to people are when these pieces come together and snap into place, you got an idea of what could happen next. And I'm curious, of these puzzle pieces you talked about, is there one that stands out to you that really resonated and was part of your journey? And if so, which one?
Silence.
I know.
Well, for me, one of the things that is really important is the values piece and people learning to understand and express what their values are and to be able to talk about it with other people without necessarily politics in the way. So my values had a lot to do with why I started the podcast and a lot to do with what I talk about during it. So understanding what you value highly is a really important step in knowing where you could go.
Thanks.
I think over time in your career, you sort of develop a sense of what companies or organizations align with your values, and like you just have to find where you're aligned. Another thing I wanted to mention is that supposedly years ago, some famous rock star, like guitarist, said, if I could do it all over again, I would have majored in accounting. And what I think they meant by that was, and it's a challenge that a lot of people that are in a creative space face, is that how do you know those how do you develop financial literacy, financial savviness, and those survival techniques? Melissa, you talked a little bit about this when you pivot over to suddenly you're a consultant and then you have to spend a third of your time marketing yourself and a third of your time on admin. Years ago, there used to be an organization called the Graphic Artists Guild that did a great job giving out like, sample SOWs, sample contracts, that kind of stuff. And I think that's one thing I would love to see in the kind of tech space now is some sort of resource for people to learn how to develop, like how do I develop myself as a business? Because we can't look to businesses to hire us. We have to pull ourselves out of this.
There are a number of resources for people in the tech industry to
Oh,
develop
sweet.
themselves. Yeah, there's Fractionals United, which is a paid Slack channel. There's also some various pockets of communities that talk about like the business of coaching and consulting. They are out there. I'm happy to
awesome.
share more.
Thank you.
But yeah.
Melissa, if you have some suggestions there that you can pass along to me, I'll put it in the notes for
Yeah.
today too. I did want to get to, so I always run long. I wanted to ask you all, I have a few more. Does everyone have 5 more minutes on the panel? And if you
Yeah.
don't, you can go. No pressure.
I was actually thinking about the question that was in it.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. Thank you,
Yeah.
Melissa. See, you're very good
Yeah.
at being on top of moderating these. It's a superpower. Barnaby had an excellent question, and it focuses on zone of genius and superpower. What do you do when your superpower is totally different to what you've worked on before? And this superpower is also very saturated, such as the music industry as a singer-songwriter. So you go from the saturated UX industry into another, probably even more saturated. Any advice from the panelists for Barnaby?
So the way I was thinking about this is because I'm a product person, I'm thinking about product market fit. And, I feel like we all have multiple different types of skills, right? None of us are just a single skill. And so when we're thinking about what the opportunities are, right, we should think about just as if creating your own business, right? Thinking about, okay, what is my core competency? What is the market looking for? Is there a business opportunity here, right? Like Rob said, thinking about the financials of running a business. And sometimes it doesn't align perfectly, but sometimes you can tweak it to think about, okay, what skills do I have around here? Where might the opportunities be? Assuming that you're looking to do something and make money from it. If you're a singer-songwriter, maybe there is something locally where you can help create an event or something like that to try to find opportunities to network and to make inroads where you want to go. But what I've found is that the direction I think I want to go in isn't always exactly the direction that they'll actually gain traction in, experimenting along the way. And hey, this one didn't work. Let me try this. Let me try that. And it's the same with creating a product, right? You end up making some tweaks along the way before you find what really resonates.
Kasha, one of our attendees, put something in the window that I think it's really, really important to highlight for not just Barnaby, but everyone here. Kasha was saying, I used to work in design at Isotope Instruments, Native Instruments, and we were always looking for someone who had design skills but understood music. This perfectly exemplifies, thank you, Kasha, that there is only one you. So if you've had a design career too, and Melissa, you were speaking to this, like find the product market fit, but there's only one you who has all of these certain facets. And if there's a way you can snap it together, like as Melissa was saying, you can be networking, you can see what's out there. Most likely when that puzzle comes together, it's not going to be what you necessarily envision, but it's possible to take your UX career and your music side and bring it together. So, Kasha, thank you for sharing.
Like, it's not necessarily I go from here and I go directly to here. There might be some steps in between that can get you closer and closer to what you actually want to do. And I think you should think about, okay, I want to get from A to B. What are the steps? Like, what are possible paths? Is there some intermediary thing that makes sense to get me closer to where I want to be?
I was going to mention, I have two buddies of mine. One of them is a traditional singer, does a lot of Irish kind of music. And then another buddy who runs a charter boat company. And they've actually blended their chocolate and peanut butter together because like people apparently like listening to sea shanties as they go out like around Gloucester Harbor. So like it's been sort of interesting to see these two people suddenly like they combined and they're offering this service that has been popular. And then the next question becomes, well, how much can I charge for it? You know what I mean? Like a 2-hour sale, like what is it? So yeah, as Melissa said, you got to find opportunities, figure out how you can monetize them, and just expect that, it's not a straight path. It's going to zig and zag a little bit.
And if I can just add one thing,
Stephanie,
is to continue to grow your network. So where there are opportunities for collaboration, you can see more and you can maybe come up with something that you wouldn't necessarily have thought about, or maybe one of your business sort of feeds into another. So that is also a part of what you're doing, is seeing where you could connect with others.
I think just adjacencies in terms of like, this is why I like to be a singer-songwriter. If that is not, or you're still figuring it out, how can you still find adjacencies where that same energy is tapped? Those same skills are tapped as well.
I would just say one more thing, which is that some people think that if they're making a pivot, they have to completely stop this thing and just do that thing. But like I started writing the book while I was employed in-house, and then I got laid off and I'm like, well, at least I have the book. There's having a couple of things going at the same time, if you're not quite sure which one's going to work out, I think is helpful, because you may end up actually liking this one better than this one. And you can tweak as you go.
Well, and Melissa, to piggyback off that and what Stephanie, you had said about like starting, to your point, Melissa, it's also starting small. You don't have to have like something super grandiose to start testing out options, starting lean, seeing what's working, see what resonates, see what feels right. I shouldn't have been surprised by expertise in the tech industry that you brought something up that is a missing puzzle piece. All of you brought up the money piece. Like, oh, it's great to have something aligned with our values and superpowers, but we need to make money. I recently was talking with Bhaski Mukherjee, who is a product leader, and she said, you need a puzzle piece around commercial fluency, understanding the product market fit, understanding how you'll make money. So thank you all for mentioning that. I so appreciate it. Thank you all. I now know this should have been a 4-hour conversation, so I may try to invite you back. And thank you to all of the attendees. I did want to have one moment of shameless marketing for all of you for some things that are coming up. Back to career reinvention, there's a couple of lift up programs that are coming up, and I'll put the links in the chat. Back to Melissa is doing fantastic work in the product space. Melissa and I will be having a lightning talk next week, building a product roadmap that sticks. So if you found anything interesting that Melissa was saying, This is going to be a fabulous lightning talk. So I'll put the link in the chat for all of you to attend. I'm also running in the middle of August for women in tech and women in business specifically, a 6-week cohort on reimagining your career. So with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen. And Melissa, Rob, Stephanie, Malini, thank you so much for joining. Question for all of you before we wrap up, just quick roundtable based on the discussion with other leaders who have reinvented. Not to put you on the spot, you don't all have to answer, but did you panelists have any one major lesson learned from the other panelists you spoke to today? And if so, what was it?
For me, it was Stephanie's just get started. I think even though we may have done it in the past, we have to remind ourselves to keep doing it all the time, right? So that was my big takeaway today.
Thanks, Malini.
Rock.
Well, with that, you do all rock. I think it's really important. Like, as I mentioned as we were starting, there's a lot of waxing poetic what to do during this messiness. The fact that you all were so open about your journey and how you've gotten to where you are and open about the mess and your lessons learned. These are the stories I'd really like more people to be hearing, that things don't shift overnight, but your lessons learned. I can't thank you all for your generosity sharing with me and with the attendees today. I so appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For those of you, if you'd like to find Rob, Malini, Stephanie, and Melissa, can you all just say where the best place to find you, and then we'll head off. But starting with you, Rob, where can people find you if they want to learn more or find your book?
Oh gosh. So I have my blog is at Shabbat. What is it called? Oh my God, I forgot the name of my blog.
We can come back to you, Rob.
Just ping Christina. She knows where to find me. The book is
Yes,
called We're
I'll
in
send the
Rockport,
link.
Massachusetts. My LLC is called Shabacco Creative. I'm on the web.
Thanks, Rob. Malini?
The best place to find me is on LinkedIn. I do have a portfolio site and a blog, but that's where we can start. So LinkedIn is good. I'll throw the link in here.
And Stephanie, I saw you put some links in here. Anywhere else they might find you?
Yeah, I can be found on LinkedIn. I put in my podcast/blog address and the leadership development, mostly in higher ed right now, particularly for people who have just been laid off. And I saw one of our participants from our cohort is actually in the audience. So yeah, you can find me in all those places.
Thank you. And finally, Melissa, where can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, melissaappel.com, and alignedthebook.com.
Thank you, everyone. And attendees, thank you so much for coming today. I hope it was helpful hearing these stories. I will send up a follow-up with the notes and links to all of these amazing panelists' info. And thank you all very much. Rob, Melissa, Malini, Stephanie, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Good luck, everyone.
Bye.